Hello, welcome to Working with Miniatures. I'm Jim, and tonight we're going to be painting the Human Warlock Callus Darklore from the Dark Heaven Legends line from Reaper Miniatures. We'll primarily be using Army Painter Speedpaints 2.0 and their Warpaints line. Let's get started. Vallejo primers were airbrushed onto this miniature, first with matte black, followed by zenithal sprays of gray and white. I'll be base coating this miniature entirely with 2.0 speed paints, and after some debate I decided not to go all black robes. I know he's a warlock, but I want to run this miniature as a blasphemous necromancer, so I start with poppy red. This 2.0 speed paint goes on bloody and dries vibrant, similar to Army Painter's pure red war paint. I next apply occultist robes to the rest of the clothing. This paint looks purple when you put it on, but it dries to a nice off black. Now, when I mentioned I wanted him to be a blasphemous necromancer, I mean a traveling do-gooder, both boisterous and sociable, easily charming those he meets with his wild yarns and anecdotes. His personable nature will add to their disgusted shock as negative energy crackles from his eyes and hands. They can do nothing as he raises their beloved dead from the bordering burial plots. I'm still meaning to do a side-by-side comparison of bony matter and pallid bone, but I'm pretty sure bony matter has far less yellow in it and dries as more of a light brown. It would also serve well as worn leather or a pale ashen flesh tone. For the skin, I used peachy flesh. I want him looking healthy, older but not elderly. His blissful tears will run down unsucking cheeks at the edges of a wide and joyous smile as he breathes life into the once deceased. A sight that churns the stomachs of the onlooking townsfolk. To further the strength he still holds, his hair will have no gray, but instead retain the healthy sheen of brown he has always had. I went with dusk red, and I really like this color. If speed paints were tasty, I bet this one would be the tastiest. Though tasty or not, I feel the growing outrage of the townsfolk would warrant the immediate stoning of this heretic. The chittering of the three united Cobalt tribes that march even now towards this small town, the only thing staying their hands, for they will need all the help they can get. Continuing the idea of a more lively looking necromancer, I add some flourish with hoplite gold, one of the new metallic speed paints. This works well as far as belying his necromantic practices, but then again, not really. It all boils down to context. The united tribes of the Plainsmore Cobalts outnumbered the townsfolk 3-1, even so bolstered by the dead. Their primitive spears and poisoned arrows were of little use against the zombies and skeletons. The battle was fierce but short, and the superstitious creatures scurried off, fearful their fallen would also rise against them. Callus breathed a sigh of relief. Not a single townsfolk was harmed in the battle, and no damage done to the town itself. It was a clean victory. But there would be no merriment, nor glint of gratitude here. I hit the base with AK Interactive's Lunar Desert Terrain. I really love these products, but I'll be dropping Flock and Static Grass on it later, so I didn't really care which one I used, only reaching for one that was already open. I add some controlled washing with dark tone for shadows here and there, primarily in the deep folds and recesses. I didn't show it here, but I also drilled out the bottom of this miniature and pinned it to the base with part of a paperclip, which I should have always been doing with these heavier metal miniatures. I've always loved the metal molded miniatures since that's what I grew up with, and they look truly great, but I'm sure if I dropped an unpinned model, it would be on one side of the room and its former base on the other. From here on, the rest of the work will be 2 or 3 layer highlights, each covering progressively less surface area, followed by a very thin glaze of the original speed paint base coat. The speed paint glaze is so thin it's more of a stain and doesn't work like a speed paint anymore. This is to blend the highlights together and help smooth some sloppy transitions for my amateur hand. "Blasphemer!" a woman accused. "Defiler!" cried another. Callus's hand gripped tightly, knotted by his fury. "Blasphemer? Defiler?" he roared back, incensed. How? How have I defiled these bodies? Did I spit upon them? No. I blessed them with one more chance to defend their homes and their ungrateful spawn, all of whom would be burning upon spits and consumed before daybreak. I thought you were merely bereft of nourishment from the famine plaguing this land, but no. Your souls and minds are also reeling with want, so blinded by your faith in your petulant gods. Gods deluding you into believing that necromancy is terror incarnate. The same gods who would lose the faith of all of you were you to realize the one simple truth of life, that death does not mean the end. Go then. Callus gestured first to the shambling bodies, then to the graveyard. Return to your homes. You are no longer wanted by your children. They are repulsed by the bravery you've shown here today. The corpses obeyed, and it seemed to more than a few of the living townsfolk that their ancestors' shoulders were slumped just slightly more than before. Without looking back, the blasphemous, nay, the benevolent Callus Darklore walked out to the empty plains alone, unthanked and unwanted. I didn't paint in the eyes other than dropping some matte black into the deepest recesses. If I do run this miniature in a game as a true bad guy, his bushy eyebrows casting his eyes in absolute darkness will only add to his menace. I then mist or weathering solvent multi-black and pin washed around this miniature to help better define some of the details. The final task before finishing out the base was to paint on some sacrilegious scripture. My first thought was some Lovecraftian Iya Cthulhu Fatagan babble, but how could I not go with Klaatu, Barada? How else did you think Callus became a necromancer after working in the sporting section of his local S? This is the final result. I really like how the bone, scroll, and red clothing came out. The dark clothing is okay but needs more highlights, especially on the cloak. The hair and flesh are decent and are mostly hampered by some overly white highlights. The metallics weren't god-awful, and there are actually some decent highlights and shadows painted on. The only caveat is that you can only really see it in pretty dim light. I'm learning one of my problems with metallic paints, especially the brighter ones, is that they reflect too much light. Maybe it's time I make myself go full non-metallic metal for a while, maybe even an entire year. Then again, I just bought this damn giant box of speed paints which came with new metallic ones. Maybe I'll wait until 2024 to go full non-metallic metal only. What do you think? That's going to wrap it up for tonight. I hope you learned something or were inspired to start or expand your own collection. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. And if you like the content of this video and would like to see more, please like, share, and subscribe. I'm Jim with Working with Miniatures. I'm truly grateful for your time, and I bid you a fond farewell. Until the next video.